Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and in today's episode we're going to be reviewing and breaking down Mockingjay, Book 3 and the finale of the Hunger Games trilogy by Susan Collins. In this episode we're going to be going deep, covering specific scenes, character moments, and what actually makes this book land and divide readers for many various reasons. We're going to be covering premise, who it's for, what to expect, themes, characters, standout moments, and a final verdict. And here's a fair warning, this is the most controversial book in the trilogy among fans, so we'll get into why later on. It's also good for readers who want to see a rebellion play out, not just teased, as this is the payoff book for that arc. It's also good for readers who can handle a heavier, more psychologically dark tone in the first two books. It's amazing for fans of war stories more than the game's stories, and this book leaves the arena format behind almost entirely. It's not the book for readers who wanted a clean, triumphant action movie ending. It's intentionally messier than that, and there's no arena this time, as the entire book is set in District 13 and the war itself, which is a big structural shift. There's a much darker, more traumatized version of Katniss than in the first two books. It's slower, more fragmented pacing at times, especially in the middle, reflecting Katniss's mental state. There's real war violence and loss, as character deaths hit harder and more suddenly than in the previous books. And there's also an ending that trades spectacle for a quieter, more bittersweet resolution. So this book picks up right after the arena breakout, with Katniss in District 13, a hidden militarized district that's been secretly organizing the rebellion. Peeta is left in capital custody, and Katniss has to reckon with what that means while adjusting to a new authority structure under President Cohen. Katniss is also pushed into becoming the Mockingjay, a literal propaganda symbol for the rebellion, filmed and staged for maximum impact. As the war escalates, Katniss has less and less control over her own choices, caught between capital propaganda and District 13's own agenda. The story builds towards a final confrontation in the capital itself, and a decision at the very end that reframes everything the series has been building toward. And then comes the hijacked Peeta storyline, and which is Peeta returning from the capital custody, brainwashed to see Katniss as a threat to as is one of the most disturbing talked about twists in the series, as readers tend to find it more upsetting than anything in the first two books. The propaganda video filming scenes, watching Katniss get coached and manipulated into performing rebellion for cameras, it mirrors the game's themes from book one, and a lot of readers pick up on that parallel. And the sewer slash mutt chase through the capital, a genuinely terrifying action sequence that a lot of readers point to as the last classic Hunger Games tension of the series before things get more grounded and grim. Then come Finnick and Annie's wedding, which is a rare moment of joy, which is inserted into an otherwise bleak book, which makes what happens to Finnick later on hit even harder because he just got married, and he was also one of the most favorite books characters in the series. Uh, Finnick's death in the sewers, widely cited as one of the most gutting character deaths in young adult fiction, partly because it happens fast and without a dramatic and send off. And then comes the worst death of the entire series, Prim's death, which is the emotional gut punch of the entire series. And the fact that Katniss's entire arc started with saving Prim makes this hit especially hard, and it's a moment that recontextualizes the entire trilogy. Then comes the final decision with Coin. Katniss's choice at the very end is one of the most debated moments in young adult fiction, and readers tend to either fully get it or need to sit down with it before it clicks for a while. And the quiet, non-triumphant epilogue, there's no big celebration, just survival and slow healing, which is a deliberate contrast to typical young adult endings and tends to be either loved or disliked depending on the reader. And just a reminder that war is not clean, and the book deliberately avoids making either side purely good, including the good guy rebellion. And propaganda cuts both ways, as District 13 uses Katniss the same way the Capitol did, just for a district cause. Now I'm going to be talking about the themes. The first one is PTSD and trauma, the same as book 2, as Katniss's mental state is front and center for most of the book, including numbness, dissociation, and panic. Then comes the theme of power corrupts regardless of ideology. Coin's arc is central to this theme, especially by the book's end, as he is the new president, but he's still corrupted like President Snow. Then comes the next theme of grief without redemption. There's several deaths in this book that don't come up the narrative, and it's about this book is mainly about Katniss's losing agency rather than gaining it, which is a deliberate inversion of typical hero arcs. Now I'm going to be talking about the characters. First, I'm going to be talking about Katniss, and in this book, Katniss was, of course, a braver and a more of a rebellious version of herself. And in this book, she's a little bit more crazier, or her mental health isn't doing well, and she's in her losing arc where she's losing everyone, but she also wins. She finally fights back and wins the battle against the government or the capital, but at what cost, the reader asks, because she's lost so much along the way that it doesn't matter anymore, as the people she was fighting for are now dead, and all she did now is free the future generations. And next is Peter Malark. His hijacking storyline turns him into both a victim and a threat, and his slow recovery becomes one of the book's most important emotional through lines. Then comes President Coin. He's introduced as a resistance leader, but increasingly revealed to be just as willing to use people as Snow was. Then comes President Snow. He's less physically violent, but he's still pretty violent along the way, and he's changed a lot since the second book. Then comes Gale Hawthorne. His willingness to accept collateral damage for the rebellions causes real distance between him and Katniss, and reframes the earlier his setup as more thematic than romantic with Katniss. Then comes Finnick Odier, and he gets a genuinely happy arc, as his marriage to Annie before his death makes him one of the most fully realized supporting characters by the end. Then one of the saddest deaths of a character, Primrose Everdeen, and she's largely off screen or off book for most of this trilogy, but her presence and eventual death is the emotional anchor of Katniss's entire journey. And the same first person present tense style, but noticeably more fragmented in places, reflects Katniss's declining mental state. And this book is structurally different from book 1 and 2, as there's no arena, no clear game to follow, and more traditional war narrative and structure. And this is pretty realistic, and I like the book was like this because it really shows that rebellion and war isn't beautiful, and the book wasn't beautiful either. It was painful, and the book really expressed it, as this book did a really good job doing that. And the pacing is less consistent, as some readers find the middle section slower and more disjointed on purpose, and the emotional tone is heavier and less adventure driven than the earlier books. The most ambitious book of the trial This is the most ambitious book of the trilogy thematically, even if it is less fun to read. And it makes sense, as I said before, because this rebellion isn't painless, and most of these people that we see, Katniss and all the other characters other than her that she knows, don't just don't just win this out of no sacrifice, and they have to sacrifice a lot to do this. And Prim's death and the final coin slash no decision are the two moments that define how people feel about the ending overall. The ending's refusal to be triumphant is, on reflection, one of the most mature decisions in young adult fiction, even if it's harder to sell in the moment, and it upsets a lot of readers because this series has been a grand series and it's pretty popular, and the books sell for a lot. But the ending can be a little bit upsetting for a few people because it's not a happy ever after ending after all. And I would say that you should go in expecting a war novel, not a third games book, and that mental reset helps a lot because that doesn't really disappoint you. And it really upsetted me when I read the book, because in the other two books, the first half of the book didn't even tell you that the games existed, or you didn't even get that big of a introduction to the games, and all of a sudden you were jump started into the games in the second half. So that was the theme for the first two books. So in the third book, you read the book eagerly till the middle point, and then you're like, oh wait, the games didn't show up. So that kind of leaves the reader a little bit disappointed. And I would say don't rush the middle section, as the fragmented pacing is intentional, not a flaw to skim past. Also, pay attention to how propaganda is used on both sides, as it's the through line that ties the entire trilogy together. Give the ending time to sit before deciding how you feel about it, as a lot of readers come around to it on a reread, and they think differently about it, and it angers a lot of us. But later on, you'll understand why Susan Collins decided to do that, because this wasn't in this because this book really had to express rebellion in a way that really made sense and really hit hard on the reader. It's also the most divisive book in the trilogy, but arguably the most thematically consistent with what the series was building toward. As Katniss's entire objective was of fighting towards the game was because of Primrose, and she died. And then basically everybody that she loved and was friends with, they also died. And she was basically the only one fighting a, towards a broken cause towards the end. And it's definitely heavier, darker, and less entertaining than book one and two by design. And the character losses and the ending won't land for every reader in the moment. So, overall, just wrapping it up, this book is a bold, unglamorous conclusion that trades spectacle for a more honest, gut punching of an ending. This trilogy was was amazing, and this last book really ended all of that with what I would say was a perfect ending, and a ending that really stuck with the readers. So in the next episode, guys, I might be covering the prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I'll be opening up what I think about it and a review. So that's all, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and that's all for today. Bye.